Folks, we are live. Welcome to the Random Party Generator, and I am Eric Tenkar, one of your hosts tonight. I feel like it should be a Halloween special, but it isn't. One of your hosts. With me is the chubby funster, also known as Greg Christopher.
Hello, I will also be one of your hosts tonight.
Oh, yeah. And just so you know, Chubby Funster, if you put that into the YouTubes, as they say it in the other school, the YouTubes, you can find his channel. He actually has a channel.
I've been dropping a lot of videos.
Yes.
They've been doing very well.
So I'm trying.
Hey, I'm still a blogger. I just
Yeah,
dropped
Rob.
a blog.
Rob has the weight of this show on his shoulders. He's holding us up. Greg and I. He's got it. He's got us.
Well, he's got those shelves.
Yes. And this is Mr. Rob Conley,
Hey,
Mr.
folks.
Bat in the Attic. Tonight, this is your quorum for tonight. We may have others. You never know. If
The
bad
wuss
night
is
gets-
backed out.
yeah,
Joe had stuff to do.
He's pumping
Tim had-
iron,
yeah, he's pumping. He's pumping.
Tim?
and he is not totally boozing it up.
No, totally.
Tim was reviewing your book, right? He's writing all of his notes about how bad it was, right, Rob?
I guess
Or,
so.
did I misunderstand that? What was it he said? He was reviewing it like a editor
Yes, like an editor at the bookstore. Now,
at the bookstore.
at the bookstore, he was going to be at the bookstore.
I'm sure it's very good.
Yep.
Rob's a good.
I'm sure they're going to
Robert's a
throw
good
him out like
writer.
a homeless man.
Yeah, we
um,
ironed out the kinks with Google using Google Docs for editing. In theory, it's pretty good. It's just that you cannot feed too long of a document. So, I had to section the whole manuscript into 4 sections, and then it worked a lot better. But the part where you review corrections and comments I think, works smoother than Word.
Folks, just so you know, we love our Google overlords. Okay, here on this YouTube channel, we say nothing bad about them. All hell Google.
I said, fuck Google. I mean, either if
I
they
know.
do it right, I'll praise them. If they fuck it
I,
up,
I
like cancel Google Plus,
oh God,
don't get my ire.
oh Google Plus, what Hangouts, right? Didn't Hangouts also go the way of the dodo bird?
I don't know. I was mad about that, but I was also, in retrospect, it was a good thing for my mental health to have a total reset on my primary social media thing. I got to take a breather. I took like 3 years off of social media.
No, that was probably pretty good because you can't be the Pope of the OSR and keep your sanity.
Somebody in the YouTube comments for these videos I've been dropping, somebody who I didn't even know who they were brought up that I was the Pope of the OSR. It's out there.
Did they bring up that effing cop?
No, they didn't. They didn't bring up that.
All right, because I was your squire.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, Greg took the shots. I came along. I cleaned up and kicked in the nuts.
Well, it seems like a lot of us have been commenting on the OSR. So, leads to my leading question of the evening. What do you guys think is the point of the OSR? And there'll be 3 more questions for those of you in the audience. This is not the only point.
Answer me these questions for.
So, Greg, what's the point of the OSR?
The point of the OSR is that the direction that the hobby has taken over time should not be the direction taken by major corporations that control major properties in the hobby. The direction that they've taken over time should not be the only directions that we take. And so people went back and made Osric and Labyrinth Lord and other things like that initially just to take control of the properties, let it so that you could publish for this stuff again rather than being left behind. And now it is a home for people who want to develop games in a way that is very different from what mainstream RPG companies are putting out. And that's true whether you're talking about Wizards of the Coast, but it's also true about from Paizo and other major brands that are in the hobby. And I think it's gotten to be so popular now that it's becoming commercially viable for people to
But
move in our direction.
in your mind, what distinguishes those what called indie RPGs? I mean, what you describe applies to indies, yet we're not considered the same as indie RPGs.
Well, because they're designing the game to fit their kind of their profit motive and their corporate objective rather than it being to make the game as fun as possible. So
Indie games?
a corporate title is designing it that way. And so in general, an indie producer is going to produce that way. But when all of the corporate people move in a particular pattern, it then opens it up. Just like when Wizards of the Coast did 4th edition, it made it, there was a huge number of people who still wanted to play 3rd edition. And so there was a market opportunity there for people who wanted to keep playing 3rd edition. That's how we got Pathfinder. So I think people have realized that you don't have to just do that for 3rd edition and go back even further. I don't think anybody's resurrecting 2nd edition, but it's just being mined for content. But that kind of thing, like I don't want to play the game that works like the way you're doing it. I want it to work this way. And so people have followed. That's why I do it. I don't do it because of some nostalgia. I didn't even play 1st edition or anything back before. So I started on 2nd edition. I like this stuff because it works in a way that creates a better gameplay experience than what I get out of other, 3rd and later.
How about you, Eric? What's the point of the OSR?
All right. Well, see, the issue is, and I was doing my series on the history of the OSR, and going into that, the OSR as it was initially designated was there to revive or resurrect, if you will, classic D&D, AD&D game style play. But it's become a bit more as it evolved, because initially you had clones, then you got simulacrums, then everybody people call it their own home. That's what somebody's house rules. Lamentations is somebody's house rules, sure, but it sells, right? I think the OSR is two things, and you're in one camp or the other. You're either in the camp that the OSR is about D&D 2E and before, and bringing it back, and if you can run an adventure from before 3rd edition with minimal changing of the rules, it's OSR. And then you got the camp that goes, it's about the feel, it's the aesthetics. It isn't the rules so much, it's the feeling of the rules. And that's when you get things like Mork Borg or Zweihander. I don't know, fuck Zweihander. I'm not saying it's a bad game.
I concur about Zweihander.
I'm not saying it's a bad game, but as a marketing ploy, that is a corporate decision coming in and usurping what the OSR is. Now,
that sweet second community content line on Drive Through RPG. They're the only ones.
Yeah. And, the OSR these days is either, I guess I'm leaving out the idea if it's that do-it-yourself thing, right? It's the hackability of it. But I think that there's classic OSR, and that is stuff that, again, you can pull a 2nd edition module off the shelf and run with it, or basic or AD&D. You can bring a classic piece of your gaming history and run it at the table, and no issues, which will leave out Mork Borg and probably Shadow Dark and DCC. Or you
could run that stuff in Shadow Dark.
Shadow Dark.
The only thing you need to change is to adjust the pricing. You could just divide the price of treasure by by tenfold, you'd be fine. Just to knock
Right.
off a decimal point. Yeah.
So what you're saying, Shadow Dark is the same ballpark as Castle Crusade, which is also a
Yeah.
drop-in. Even
Right.
though
Okay.
Castle
Yeah.
Crusade predated the OSR, it's designed to drop in the place of AD&D 1E, so you could use the original content as is.
Right. So I look at Castles and Crusades like I call it. I call it proto OSR, right? Or the Rosetta Stone, between third edition and classic or OSR gaming. So I guess you could say Shadow Dark is something similar. It's that Rosetta Stone between 5e and classic OSR style gaming. And
Well,
I think Shadow Dark is just a beautiful way to bring people to the old school style of gaming without like shattering their minds like I had to do at a time.
well, I think Castle Crusade, the situation surrounding Castle Crusade epitomizes what the OSR ultimately began. Because if I don't know if your research cover this or you remember this, but the whole reason Osric this, not so much Gonerman and Basic Fantasy. I don't think Gonerman had the same reaction to Castle Crusade as Finch and his
Right.
Marshall and his crew, but Osric Project was like essentially fuck. Castle could say that's not what we wanted. We could do it better, and that better happened to be Osric. So the OSR got us, it's almost a reaction against what Castle Crusade began. They didn't think they wimped out and didn't go far enough.
I I'm open to specific points where I'm wrong here, but I think in general I'm correct about this statement. Almost all of this stuff is just house rule variation for minor issues. Um, I mean, it's not like introducing whole new subsystems. Like even Shadow Dark, if you picked up, AD&D, and the only thing you added was advantage and disadvantage instead of certain modifiers, it would be so close to Shadow. I mean, like it would be crazy. It's really not that far off in any mechanical sense for all these things.
Well,
And Joe is always talking about his like 5e house rules and all this. People are doing that even with higher editions, but these are small variations to a robust system that works. Like it's a good, reliable system that you can adjudicate most things with. And it's easy for some of us to go, well, I think that dexterity is a little too powerful within the six attribute pantheon, and you should make it less important and raise up charisma a little bit or something. But it it works good enough that is that worth buying a whole nother game? Is that worth doing also? So I think people are just they're reaching a point. I think Eric, you may have said this in your one of your recent videos. Like, people are fine with the systems that they have available now. We don't need to have some kind of new huge innovations anymore. A lot of people in the past year or so have been saying, like, let's just use these tools that we have.
well, I agree in part, but okay. So everything from OD&D, in my view, to AD&D 2E are highly compatible. But I played with the three brown booklets only. It is a distinct feel from every other edition of classic D&D. Also, then once you add the Greyhawk supplement from OD&D plus Greyhawk through the BCEMI box set, that also has a distinct feel. And then when you go to AD&D 1E, and especially when you add Unearthed Arcana on top of it, that also has a distinct feel. But they're not so distinct that they're incompatible. But when you play a campaign with those sets of rules, they don't feel the same. They don't feel
I
like it's different
understand
as
that,
they're playing
and
playing GURPS, but they have enough of a feel that they have their own fan
but
bases.
Rob, Lutheranism and baptism have significant differences, but they're Protestants that are radically different from a lot of other options that are out there in the space. You know, the fact that we can articulate fine pointed differences between all these systems doesn't mean that compared to Vampire the Masquerade, you know, compared to whatever, like these systems are very, very close.
Right, but where they show up is when you look at an individual creator like me, you, or Eric, or you know, Joe Block, or
Well, yeah, I mean,
Mac, or
because of the three things
Alexander
we
Alex
disagree
Macker.
on, you're totally
It
wrong.
the
Yeah.
fields are what informs our creative choices and leads to why our efforts are not in lockstep with each other, even though they still remain highly compatible.
Yep.
So um, it's not. I don't think we need to overemphasize. I would say to anybody thinking about looking at this system themselves, don't overthink it. But on the other hand, don't ignore it either. They are important, but not as important as some people make it out to be. As for my take on the point of the OSR, I tend my view on philosophy and style of play. The OSR is pretty much all of the above. It's who we're talking. Like I have my own philosophy, my own style of play. Greg, the same for you, the same for Eric, the same for everybody that we ever talked about or talked with the OSR. Joe, Tim. Um, However, I like to focus on the logistics. And the point of the OSR is that we had fans of the classic edition from OD&D to AD&D 2E, and Matt Finch and Stuart Marshall and Chris Gonerman all figured out a hack that if you take the D20 SRD, omit the newer stuff like feet, the result is but a hop and a skip from the edition that they liked. So in the case of Gunnerman, it was a form of BXD&D. For the case of Stuart Marshall and Matt Finch, it was a form of AD&D 1E, and they took it to that level. But the thing is, because the D20T SRD is open content, people like Dan Proctor and then Matt Finch with Swords and Wizardry realized, hey, I got my own idea on how this is done, and they took it to that next level. Then Jim Raggy took it to took his
That's
take
what I'm
on it.
saying
I
about
did.
these being house rule sets. It's really just not that big of it's not that big of a difference between them.
Right, and what that led, and then ultimately, now that we're 20 years into this, people kept doing variations of that until we get the Morkborg, until we got the Shadow Dark, until we got the DCT RPG. That if they do have a connection to those classic edition, but it is a thread, a longer thread than Osric and Swords and Wizardry are. But I think if you go beyond more those systems, then it becomes its own independent indie, and that's why we have an OSR that those out of print editions still keep us grounded. That you have to trace it. There is a connect. As long as there is connection, you can reasonably claim OSR. I think where you get unreasonable is in the case of Dryhander. It's clearly a Warhammer its lineage, which is own independent. Worthy has its fan. Go ahead, knock yourself out. More power that they did it, but
No,
it's not really OSR. It doesn't have
right.
a
Well,
connection to
let's move
classic
on to your
either.
second question then.
Well, actually, no,
Okay.
but before we do, I want to address two quick things though. Basic Fantasy RPG and Osric had different intents. Osric was a way to uh, be a tool to publish first edition adventures without saying for 1E. It wasn't initially intended to be played. That wasn't. They didn't expect people would, being that the rules weren't out of print for that long. They figured people would still be playing with their 1E rules, but and everybody liked the fact that Osric was easy to grok. And Basic Fantasy RPG was a community project that was being run and still is by a community. So there, but Osric was still trying to do something that Basic Fantasy gives stuff away. Osric gave itself away, but just so people like Expedition Retreat Press and others could use it to publish works that were under the OGL but compatible with 1E. So there's that. That was what gave this whole thing. And once they opened up the door, everybody rushed in and went, "Holy crap, we can do it!" That's why.
Right, because people wanted to do this to begin with, and
Yes,
now, thanks to the
certainly,
hacks
certainly.
that those two pioneered, and the risk, because the risk wasn't, you know, there was a risk involved, and they tried to minimize it, but now people were able free to do 90% of what they wanted to do in the first place with this stuff that they love.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, so back to you, Greg. The next question on that was asked. So why does the OSR reject modern systems?
Because modern systems, first off, have to define what a modern system is. But in my view, the problem that I have with modernity, modern systems, is that it's designed to create outcomes that are crappy, and they're mostly aligned that way for commercial reasons. Starting with fourth edition, if we draw a line there, like we were talking a little bit before the show started. Um, Fourth edition started moving in a direction where like we want to sell minis, so we're going to turn everything into an encounter after an encounter after encounter, and we're going to try to sell you a battle map for that encounter, and we're going to try to sell you minis for that encounter. We're going to try to do all that shit, and people started resisting at that point pretty strongly to that kind of modernity. And you move forward to what they just did with their VTT. They wanted to try to move play in a direction that was profitable for them, but shitty. And
Hell,
people don't want that.
hell, with 4E, I as a courtesy to the game store I was using to play at, Gold Star Anime in Edinburgh, I would run some 4E stuff, and at conventions too. And I would say I quickly realized what was up. Okay, yeah, I can run a 4E event in 4 hours. This is what you're going to get. You're going to get a little bit of role playing at the beginning, a combat encounter, some role playing in the middle, a combat encounter, and then some role playing to wrap it all up. And I ran four of these modules. I ran four than Bent, but some there were some quarters that I ran two or three of the same module. It was just like the same beats every hour,
That's right.
and when it comes to now GURPS was the same way, but GURPS were just more detailed, so that's just the consequence, and I enjoyed that detail. With 4E, it just felt so artificially designed that way, and
Well, let me before we get into Eric's answer, I do want to add on that because I don't want to fixate on modernity as just the D&D path. There's also stuff like the story gaming paths and stuff that's story game adjacent, kind of in between. There's a lot of things. I think all of them are unified by a similar thread, and that is that in order to get a certain outcome, we're going to limit the agency and control that the player has over their destiny, right? So instead of you exploring the wilderness at your own pace and finding the caves of chaos and working everything at your own design, we're instead going to present a series of encounters for you to go through, or we're going to create a series of cinematic scenes that you can work through as a sequence, and you won't really have player agency outside of that narrative path, that railroaded path. Or we're going to do it in this way, or we're going to do it in that way. All of them, it's like a trading security for freedom type political dilemma. Like we're gonna take away some freedom that you have in order to create a certain outcome that we want. And there's a large number of people who are just like, fuck no, I want the freedom. I want the freedom of keep on the borderlands. I don't want to be locked into your path of encounters or your narrative flow or whatever it is. I think that's
actually,
what people find repulsive.
I mean, yes, some of that exists, but no, but systems like Burning Wheels, that's not what they do. Rather, what they do is so like Burning Wheels. I had a recent discussion with a good friend of mine about it, and so this is a little bit more fresher in my head. Is that in Burning Wheels, players have freedom, but what they do is they ignore stuff that the OSR campaigns are known to focus on. for example, a Burning Wheels is primarily focused campaign. It's primarily focused on challenging the motivation and beliefs of the characters involved. And so what happens during the Burning Wheel campaign is they skip over stuff that we in an OSR campaign would not skip over, that we would view as part of the challenge. And it's an interesting, we view as interesting challenge, what they view as boring. They go, so what they're doing is they're hopping from role playing moment to role playing moment and, you know, glossing over combat or narrating combat.
That's right. I agree.
And, but
There was a
is it a
let me
sandbox? Not quite, but it's not as straitjacket as
yeah.
you play because if they role play something one way, the campaign goes in that direction. If they role play in another way, the campaign does go in that direction. But it's not. They don't accept the world as it is. They're always looking for the next challenge. So it winds up. So basically, when I ask one of the advocates of this, so if I just want to sit back and kick back and not worry about motivation, how does that work? It doesn't work very well because that's what they're designed around.
Yeah. There, I don't remember her name, but there was a female developer at BioWare, the video game company. This was years ago now. Who, when Mass Effect was a huge series for them in the middle, this is some point in the Mass Effect trilogy. I don't remember when. And she was being interviewed by somebody, and she said something like, sometimes I wish we could just add a button that would let you skip all the combat stuff and just go to the next story part. And you could see the cutscenes and you could make choices about what to do. And then when it went back to combat, you could go, I don't want to do this, and just skip over the combat. Now, to hardcore video gamers, that's like blasphemous. Like
Right.
what are you talking about? I think it's the same thing here. Like there's people who want to skip over the stuff that old school people feel is the essential element of the game.
Well, I think that when it came, listen, the old school gaming, D&D wise, balance was bullshit, right? Balance was bullshit. We're going to balance with experience point tables, but that's not what the balance really was. The balance was that every class was needed to succeed. So you will get a chance to shine at some point, whether you're a thief, a magic user, a cleric, fighter, whatever. You're going to get your chance, but you won't be the one always pulling off the big shiny exciting stuff. And then third edition, but 3.5 went balance. And once we got to balance, and we had fourth edition, which turned everything into vanilla. Okay, there was no flavor for any of the classes. I read the rules. I looked at them and I was like, "What the hell is this?" There's no difference in advancement. It's just changing the terminology to give different flavor to the vanilla that everybody is. And I don't care if you mean it's a better vanilla. It's one of the many reasons why 4A did not succeed was because it did that. 5E sadly tried to keep that balance. And they lied to you, by the way, folks, just so you remember this. WotC lied when they said that there's a formula that they're giving you to balance your encounters and balance your adventures. It never worked, and they knew it. Okay, they sold you a crock of shit because
Well, it did work, Eric, but only in a very narrow sense.
they knew
Essentially
it.
a white room.
It,
Yeah,
it
they knew it
worked
didn't
in
work.
the sense that telling people to vote on the wrong day works,
Yeah,
right? Like you,
yeah,
you, you were getting the result you wanted as the person handing out
right.
the incorrect information.
So
Yes.
if you are an old school gamer, what you would say is essentially balance is bullshit. All right. Oh shit run for OSR is something that we still talk about in the OSR because the reality is it's not meant, every encounter is not meant to be balanced. Every encounter is not meant to be conquered. And I think that's where the disconnect comes between a lot of new school games and compared to old school games. And you can certainly look back and say, Well, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition was not balanced. No, it wasn't. Oh my god. My first TPK was that game. It was not balanced. RuneQuest. No. That's where my players learned to run away from shit. And it was a sandbox. But you take things to today and what we're being given, it's more about telling the story than it is experiencing the story.
Well, here's the thing that always annoyed me about the new school community. Okay, not their games. Okay, their games are what they are. Some are good, some are not so good, and the ones that are good deserve it. But they have, if you look at Luke Crane and if you look at some of these authors,
I
they
thought you
have
said I thought you said Ukraine for a second. I
Luke.
was like, what?
Never thought about that way, but yes, no. Luke
Go
Crane is,
on.
I believe,
Sorry.
the author of Burning Wheel. And of course, the Forge guy, himself, Ron Edward. But they have these series, and they structure, and they have this theory of play, and they build their games off of this. And we say, and I always thought it always kind of irk pisses me off when I get into discussion that they kind of diminish how we play, and yet we have all this practical experience, but what is it we're doing that's so effective in the high level view? We could we can teach somebody how to do it. That I have every confidence. We all done it in our own way. And then it occurred to me, and maybe I'm off base with this, is while they're in the business of telling a story, of crafting particular narratives, like challenging players' beliefs and motivation, I think it's accurate to say that we are in the business of creating an experience, not something that led by a tour guide. No, we set the stage and we say, "Have at it," and you're going to be challenged in one of many different ways. My campaigns, as you experienced, Greg, as you experienced, Eric, have a they're a particular kind of challenge. They're a particular kind of experience, and I try to make it so you feel like you visited the world that I'm laying out, whether it's Middle Earth when I'm using adventures in Middle Earth, or when I'm using my own majestic fantasy stuff. I try to give the feel of my majestic waterland, and we have a group known as Classic Adventure Gaming. They're over on Knights and Knaves. Um, Gabber Lux does a great, he considers himself an advocate of classic adventure gaming. They have, they try to craft experience based on how they feel Gygax presented their adventure, and then they take it to the next level with them. And each of the niche of the OSR that I see are trying to do that in their own way. And I think that's our answer. If you come to the OSR, you're coming for a particular experience. You're going to make a character, you're going to enter a world, and you're going to be challenged. And
A
going to be
challenge,
a,
yes.
it's going to be an interesting challenge. You may not live, but you may survive. But you're
Well,
it's up to
let
you
me
to make it happen.
let me give you an example here. I'm really not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm trying to toot my
No,
son's
to
horn.
your own horn.
I'm
We
no,
all put sweat and labor
oh,
into our efforts.
so I'm trying to toot my son's horn, right? So I'm making YouTube video. I'm recording the audio where I go through how a cinematic module works. My son loves Firefly and Serenity. It's one of our favorite settings. We love it. And I
Hmm.
used the module from Firefly written by Tracy Hickman, right? So I'm like, this is like an iconic example of how to do this thing with scenes that flow, and you're not focused on all the kind of normal stuff we're focused on. And I went through the recording of the audio, and I'm like, so no matter what happens at the end of this thing, the cargo has to be loaded on the ship, and you guys have to be going towards the next objective because that's part of the story. And then as soon as I stopped recording, my son goes, wow, that sucks. Like it was like, so he realized like intuitively, like, so that means no matter what you do, it's being bent to fit the outcome at the end of the thing. And he was like, why would you even play? Just watch the show. Like, that's the thing. Like, me and you and Eric, we
Mhm.
appreciate that, Rob. Like, we want to be in the driver's seat as the player. We want our choices to matter. And if we screw up, we think it's okay for our character to die. That's fine.
Right.
And then what I would do with Firefly and Serenity is I wouldn't
Use
try to
Traveler. Yeah.
recreate the show. I would look at everything that they describe about the setting
That's
that
right.
and which Josh Whedon you know did a good job of making sure his story made sense in terms of how he described the world of Firefly. And we can use that description of the world of Firefly for our own purpose to give somebody the freedom. Maybe their story would turn out similar to that of Serenity. Maybe it's something completely different and they're working with
That's right.
with with the alliance. Did I get that right? The alliance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the alliance. But either way, it's their choice, or maybe it's a mix of both. But it makes sense. We would try to make it whatever result would make sense for the world of Firefly.
Right. But only that, it's that if there's no risk, there's no reward.
Hmm.
But, and this is just an
There's
observation,
also, Eric, let me build on it. There's no glory.
there's no
There's
glory.
no glory in it.
Now, when I was a kid, you know, I was in a softball league, and the top three teams got trophies, and everybody else got bupkis. You know, you didn't. You're like, yeah, thank you for being at the award ceremony. Hey, we came in third. I got my little trophy. I was excited as a kid. The other three teams that got nothing in a 16 league got to walk away. Now, the youth of at least this country are used to always being, well, you were the sixth best in the league of six, so there's your reward. Take it and go. Our games or our game systems are reflecting that. They're not used to failure. Failure, we were used to playing in adventures, and it's like, oh man, we're happy we survived. We had to leave the treasure behind, ran out, but oh my god, we survived. That was a victory. Now, what player death? PC, I should say player death. PC death. Whether the rules allow it or not, the rules are built to disallow it or discourage it. But as Mike says in the comments, what came first? The game system not encouraging player character death, or was it the player characters not wanting their PCs to die? And I think the issue is the later systems. Now, starting with 4E, we started talking about the Christmas tree effect, right? Where you had to get all your little trinkets and make sure you picked all your feats and skills in the proper order to get the prestige class that you wanted. 5E carried most of that over to some extent.
Yep.
You put so much into your character dies. It is kind of like the Jack Trick tracks. Remember? I
Yeah.
should do a video on that. The Jack,
Blacklisted. No.
oh my God, he died, and the person feels like they themselves should be. You put so much effort into your 5e character because your design every decision you make is using like an on screen programmer to make sure all your decisions will get you where you want to be at 20th level, and now your character died and it ruined all that. No, your character
I
can't
agree.
die.
I agree that having all that investment in design of the character is a huge thing. That
Yeah.
definitely affects people. But to go to Mike's, I don't think it's one came before the other. I think it is we are had a massive shift. This is something I talked about. I talked about a lot when I talked about Shadow City because people ask me why did I set it in the 80s? Is that before the end of the Cold War and maybe halfway through the 90s, the culture began to change as we moved into the 2000s. And it used to be that our culture, I don't want to, this is tautological here, glorified glory, but it elevated glory. It was that you were trying to be out there doing something cool, doing something awesome, doing something exciting. And it moved into a safety culture where everybody not getting their feelings hurt became the number one thing. So it's not that you don't want to be the hero anymore. You want to be the unoffensive person who doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. And by moving into that culture, it makes it so that you change how you approach everything, including games. And there's a reason why it's mostly older guys that's still playing in this style. But I think there's opportunity, especially with young men today, who are like my son, who are like, I'm tired of everything being this non-competitive goo that is pointless. There's no glory, there's no victory, there's no, that's why young men are playing video games all the time, because in a video game you win.
So I'm going to speak to the issue of how kids are. Okay. Now, I am not a teacher. I am not, I work with youth sporadically. Okay.
Hmm.
So, like, I was involved with scouting a couple years back. You know, I was involved, but I have been consistently involved with youth, either through the running game stores events or through formal organizations like scouting, or back when I was 20 years old and I actually teach classes about how to play D&D to a bunch of youth
How many of their
in the
characters do you murder?
YWCA. Now, let me finish, Greg. So, kids throughout all those decades remain kids. Okay, the details have changed, but the same range of personalities versus those who put their nose to the grindstone, those who don't give a fuck, those who uh, whined, those who were like little snots, those who are joy to teach. I don't see any major changes. I don't mistake in surface details. Like if a kid's on his phone distracted, well, that kid back in the 1980s would have come in with a book or one of those little handheld LEDs distracted. It doesn't, it, that, but the proportions of the kids are kids. And the thing that really made the difference is when you treat them with respect and you explain what's in what. And that was like a sieve shaking out. And the kids you couldn't shake out were the same proportion and all. But the majority of kids appreciated and they responded accordingly. That was the biggest difference I found throughout all the career. So I don't buy this shit that kids are any worse today.
I
You're
didn't
you're
say kids are
making
worse.
Those damn
but
I'm not
kids.
saying
but
that they're worse, but
but on the other hand, I want to be clear. I'm not disagreeing with some of the things. If you're saying that games are different than the majority of the games where you're different, that they're like 5e, death is not hard enough. Sure, I would say that. But and I'm going to tie this back to the question I asked. Why do they reject modern systems? I don't think it's fair to say that the OSR reject modern system. Instead, we choose to focus on an experience that's different to what's being offered by the market leaders, and we celebrate it. We don't reject what the market leaders do. When they do something
I do.
right, we say, okay, good for you, pat on your head. But we celebrate what we like. And that's what people, and we have the logistics, thanks to digital technology, thanks for open content, we have the mean to celebrate that. So that's my answer to that question.
Rob, I wanted to bring up one thing. First of all, I had a lot to say, man. I just couldn't type fast. I couldn't type fast in the comments.
Yeah,
Rob,
we have an hour and 15 minutes,
oh
so
man,
better make it quick.
Rob, I will say that. I have my grandkids. One of them's 21. The next oldest is 17. I got one that's 14. And I will say kids are different. And I'll tell you in this way. It's not necessarily worse or better or worse. It's just they have different expectations when it comes to games. And I think a lot of it's because of the video. They have grown up with video games. They've grown up with cell phones. They grew up with a lot of things, a lot of ways. Their experience growing up is totally different from ours. I mean, any way an old fogey can compare himself to a kid. I used to work for $3 an hour at a store. I mean, everything is different for these. I mean, my
25 cents for my dad.
my grandson's first job was $18 an hour. At 16, I'm like, What the hell? I wasn't making that when I quit my regular job 20 years ago. But
My dad
I'm
said
just
the
saying,
same thing when I made 7.
yeah, I started out. I was making $5 in the '70s, and that was a lot of money. I mean, that was way over minimum wage. And I was, man, my friends thought I was a badass because I was making $5 an hour, like in 1979, and I was. I mean, that was the buying power that was insane. But I just want to say is though, they do look at games differently, and permadeath is just something that they've not grown up with in their games, because when they play video games, if they die, they respawn or they go back to another save, and that's something that I didn't grow up doing. I didn't play video games till the mid '80s. I was probably in my 20s before I started playing video games. It's a totally different experience.
Well, what I find different about kids is I'm surprised at how knowledgeable many of them are. Not all of them. Some are just as oblivious in 2010 as they were in 1980. But they're more, because of the internet and all the the abundance of information. They're more savvy. But all that meant, but see, I always had a solid case for why I played the way I do. And once I explained it to them, I didn't dumb it down. I didn't make it overcomplicated because I realized I'm prone to that. So when I'm working with an audience of newbies, I try to be mindful of that. Don't always succeed, but I try. I succeed more often than I fail. But when I explain it to them, they go, "Oh, okay, we're giving it a try." And
but see, that's good, Rob, because you're doing the right thing. I think where the old school falls down is when we sit there and these kids, we go, "You guys are doing it wrong. You guys are." It's the same thing as when our dads would tell us they walked through the snow up, up the hill. I mean, we didn't want to hear that shit from our fathers and grandfathers. How they worked for a quarter and they were happy to, work 18 hours a day for a quarter. And then this, we didn't want to hear that shit. And kids nowadays don't want to hear about how tough we had at gaming. And I think that's the problem that a lot of old fogies have when they talk about gaming, is that, well, because this is the way I did it, it's the best way. Because everybody thinks.
Funny thing, Mike, just as a quick aside, back when I went to elementary school and junior high, I did walk a mile up and down the road.
Of course
in the
you did,
snow.
Rob.
I was just at the limit where they would bus you into school. So I had a sidewalk every way. So there was that. So it's not like wilderness trekking, but there were days in Meadville that.
Well, to build on what Mike said, I just did a thing on my channel about Fandelver because Joe the lawyer said that it was the best intro module ever, and so I broke it down why I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as he was making out to be, and I pointed out all these ways that they could make it easier in the module to teach people how to learn this thing for the first time. My focus is on the teaching element of it. Like, this is a brand new GM, so don't dump a whole bunch of Forgotten Realms crap on them that they don't need to know right now. Give them smaller chunks of information. And Joe wrote maybe this video response where he was like, it should be really hard, and they should have to read all this stuff. They should have to do all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, well then they just won't play. Like I'm sorry. I do learning as a profession. Like I know what adult learners want out of a learning experience, and it's not fail 100 times until you make it. It's have it demonstrated for them, give them information in smaller chunks. You don't want a death by PowerPoint their ass with a whole bunch of crazy information. That's not a way to teach adults, right?
No,
you have to break things up. Yeah.
But but I mean, so if you approach, and I know I can tell you plenty of people that I know of all ages who started out playing 5e because that was their gateway, which, obviously it's the most popular role-playing game on the planet. And it's the most popular version of the most popular role-playing game. So they start with 5e, but a lot of them have chosen over the years to do other things like Shadow Dark or Dragon Slayer or Cat. I mean, it's just something else or they've tried older versions of the game because it's just not what they like. It's no different than people who play video games that'll play a game like, The Witcher or somebody that wants to play, what's the Monster Hunter game where you can fight a monster for 2 hours and lose. And I've seen people throw their computer at the wall because they have been fighting a monster for literally 2 hours and doing all these moves and doing this and that, and the monster wins, and they just wasted 2 hours of their life, and they get so mad they destroy their controllers because that's a game that asks a lot of you. The stakes are high. If you screw up, you can't just go to an old save. You can't just respawn. You've got to start the whole combat over, and you may be fighting another 2 hours. Compared to this afternoon, I was playing Fallout 76 online, and if you die, you immediately respawn. 3 seconds later, boom, 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 you're back.
So here's something I have observed, having been an early adopter of Fantasy Hero System Champion in '85, and then 3 years later making GURPS my main system. And I have observed this with Rollmaster, RuneQuest, any of these hyper detailed, where you put a lot of effort into character building systems that arose in the '80s. I don't know if you remember all that or ever played them extensively, but I tell you, the aversion to character death is very real in these systems. None of the players I knew at the time liked to sit down for a half hour, an hour, or some cases 2 hours building the character, only to die in the first adventure. Now, you could, as a DM, get away with that if the death felt earned. So you had to be, as a referee, if you wanted to put that amount of deadliness in your campaign, you could, but you had to. You had to earn it in the player's eyes that they had the chance to avoid it, they had the chance to discover it, and that the fight was, I wouldn't say balanced, but it was reasonable given the circumstances. Because if you just arbitrarily dropped a block of stone on it, they wouldn't play in your campaign anymore. They did, this is bullshit. We're not, either A, they said we're not going to do GURPS again, or B, we're not going to play with you again.
But see, Rob, that's a function of the system. And I would tell you that as an old school D&D player, when I had a DM that did something like that, I wouldn't play with them either. I didn't want to waste my time, and I had the same thoughts. I felt the death had to be earned. If I felt like the DM was running a cattle call where everybody that runs in dies and you roll up characters every 30 minutes, I didn't want to play that game. That's just that's a waste of my time, and that's
right,
a DM power.
But the
that's a
problem
DM
is,
power trip. I don't want to do that. So I would say that's across every system. Nobody wants to die arbitrarily.
Yeah, but it's not a binary. It's a degree. With GURPS, it happened more often because you spent more time crafting your GURPS character. This is what I noticed. Okay, and so in the hallmark of most of the modern systems that we are commenting negatively about is that they're detailed. They're detailed. They have detailed combat. Maybe they're not detailed on the non-combat side, especially for D&D 4e, but they're detailed, and you're not banging out a character like you are with a BX character, and so the effect that that GURPS effect, I would call it, that hero system effect, is in full play with all these modern systems.
But Rob, I don't think you can bang out an AD&D character, to be honest with you. Especially if you're playing something like a Ranger Paladin, you can't necessarily. I've seen people take an hour to roll up to AD&D character. Now, if you're talking one of the simpler OSR systems, sure, you can. That's a feature of the system, is to do a character quickly. But so I don't have any problem with people if they want to play a system where death is difficult, and I wouldn't laugh at them and say, "Oh, you're playing a crap ass game, you can't die." If that's the game they want to play, and if that's and also like you said, you don't want to spend. I've seen people try to create GURPS characters. It takes for freaking ever, and you don't want to die within 15 minutes of creating your character. That's just stupid. That's a waste. It's a waste of time. You're right. You'll never play GURPS again. And you, like my little brother who got an hour setting up a GURPS character, and they went to a city to do some trading before, and he got sideways with somebody and got killed in the city after taking 2 hours to roll up his character. And he said, "I'm done," and that was it.
Hey, at the Gold Star Enemy, I ran GURPS, and I ran GURPS outside of Gold Star Anime, and I had a friend named Dan who loved it so much that he wanted to referee a GURPS, and he went to Gold Star Anime, and he screwed it up so bad and killed all these players after they spent that 2 hours making it, that even though they knew how well I DM, even though they enjoyed the hell out of my campaign, they would not let me run
They're
the
done.
GURP.
We're done. We don't want to die.
And they would
after
let me run champion. They would let me run my majestic fantasy rules, but they would not let me run GURP because Dan just screwed the pooch. And if you're listening to this, Dan, I'm sorry, but man, you did screw the pooch for GURP.
Well, back in
With
the
a-
day, I mean, I saw beginning DMs screw D&D up to where players didn't want to play anymore. And they did it by arbitrary, stupid deaths. Like you'd roll up your character, you're like, okay, everybody's got characters, and the players are just kind of getting into their character. Okay, I've got this dwarven barbarian, I've got this or that, and they walk in the dungeon, and there's nobody's told them oh, by the way, you need to really check for traps. The thief needs to go ahead. They don't know. This is back when nobody knew what was going on. You just rolled a character here, go in. You didn't know that the thieves go first. There should have a scout, this and that. So you walk in and everybody falls in the pit trap and dies. Ha ha, you're all dead. Roll up another character. And I saw people get out from the table like, yeah, D&D's stupid. And that was it. And they never played again. They were done. And so it's not just it's a feature of every system that you the person running the system, you have to have a certain amount of trust in that person to run the game correctly and to give you a good time. And I see a lot of people make that mistake with convention games. Convention games, you run a convention game much different than you run a campaign game or games with friends or whatever. Because a convention game, you have 4 hours. The player has 4 hours. And I still see people screw this up all the time. You're supposed to make them have, at least let them have fun for that 4 hours. There's no great stakes here. You're just there to entertain them for 4 hours. And I've seen people absolutely screw the pooch on that. And people, who took a whole slot, I'm going to play in this game. My brother played in a system that I won't name, and he'll never play it again, even though it wasn't the system, it was the DM. But they were exploring a cavern, and they came to a fork. And my brother's been playing D&D as long as I have, 1978. He started when he was a little kid. And so, so they looked at which way to go, and they figured the right way was the best way. So they went the right way. Spent 2 hours going through this dungeon with no monsters, no treasures, no traps, just boring, describing things. They'd have, every once in a while, they'd have a little tiny encounter or something. Nothing happened. They get to the end, and the DM tells them, yeah, you guys should have gone left. That's where all the stuff was. You guys screwed up. You picked the wrong way. What the fuck?
I agree.
Well,
What the fuck?
I've
I mean,
said before-
and this system's a system that I like, and I know the person who created this system is a good system, but my brother's like, yeah, I'll never play that again. I go, no, it wasn't the system. It was the stupid DM making it a horrible experience for you. Like, oh, I know, but I can't take the chance that'll ever happen again. So I'm just,
all right, Greg, grow, and we'll answer it.
Yeah,
I've said before, every story game, if you peel back the label, you can see the butthurt in the history of that person who wrote the book. And you can see that at some point in their gaming experience, somebody did them dirty like that. Mm-hmm. And so they made this story game where the player has authorial power to override the GM in that instance where they got butthurt, right? Yeah. Every single one of them is like this. And that's why my position is just don't play with better people. Don't just get out of games like that. You don't need to fix the system to protect you. You need to get rid of people who suck at it and play with better people.
But Eric can tell you this too, and Eric knows this. Yeah. Sometimes the worst DMs are the old school guys that we've known forever.
Yeah. Okay. And listen, I'm just going to say, if you're playing in a game with me at a convention, the general rule is it's a 4-hour slot. You're probably going to be good until the first bathroom break. I'm going to bend over backwards to get into that mid-range. That, it should be exciting, should be fun. After that bathroom break, gloves are off. It is what it is. You may see that I was rolling behind the screen before, and now I'm rolling out in the open because you've gotten at least half of your time slot in the game, and if you die, you can at least say, I had a good time, and I've seen it where people have walked away after 20 minutes because somebody, not going to say names, but they are known in the industry, killed their character and was like, oh yeah, you can sit, not even you can roll up a new one. Yeah, you can watch. It's not no big deal. You can stay. No. F you.
That's why I come
Like I
with
said,
double the
these
number.
are
That's
these
why
are
I come with
legends.
double the number of pre-gens.
Yep. Yeah.
These are legends in the industry that because that's how they played, and they
Yes.
figure that well, this is experience. They haven't adapted their game. They have no reason to adapt their game. They don't care about adapting their game to the way people think now, and they don't care. They don't care if you leave and not want to play D&D anymore. It's not important to them. That's not what's important to them.
But there's also a difference between someone who's played Fallout 4 and beaten it and is super familiar with it, turning on survival mode and playing it in the hardest possible way. It's another thing for you to launch a game straight out the gate in that mode, and everybody has to play in that mode.
Right.
And so that a lot of the criticisms I had of Fandelver, I wouldn't say that about any other module. I'm saying if it's only applicable for the module you're using to teach people how to play, like you need to have a different level of complexity. So you need to have a simple thing to run where it's hard to die, and you got the bumpers up in the lane, and you can't get a gutter ball. It's easy, and then you move up to playing it more difficult level.
Well, you know what the problem with that Goblin Cave was? It's not the adventure itself. It's what they. It's not meant for a 4-player group. It is meant for 6 or 8. And the reason
I
I
didn't
think
see
I
the
think
mechanical benefits because I don't care enough to get into the math of that.
no, it's just that they didn't realize how 5e has a multiplier effect the more combatants you have. Because the whole point of 5e is that if you have a NPC or a PC, you got this inflated amount of hit points, but with that inflated amount of hit points, you get more ways of doing damage. So if you get more entities, more characters together, there's more ways to die. So it's very easy to get a tipping point where you think 4 players can take it, but it's really a hard slog. That's what I found playing several campaigns of 5e. It's just that the number of players, like when I ran a game with 8 players, which I have with 5e, things that were challenging a 4 or even 6-person group were cakewalks for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of modules. I mean, I've been looking at a lot of modules lately, and there's a lot of them that are really designed for 7+, old
That's
parties from the 70s and 80s, and people aren't running 7+ parties
No.
anymore.
no. All right. So the next question we have on our list is: what is so special about the OSR movement and its games that attracts so many people? And I'm going to take the lead on this. So what I think is special about the OSR is 2 things. First, there's no dominant brand or company that dictates what appears, or even setting the trend, so to speak. And there's a sense that anybody anybody listening on this can look at the available content and say they're doing it wrong. I can do it better, and then you can actually go out within the time that you have for a hobby, use the available content, and make your project happen. And as for why specifically classic D&D and the system motto out there remain appealing, because they work, and they're just not. They don't work because we say they work. We show that it works. Because now we're 20 years into this. We have numerous accounts of actual play, numerous supplements campaigns that are actually not designed from whole cloth, but reflect somebody's campaign, what happened in somebody's session, and that quality, that method of development shows, and that makes for an appealing package for people to try out. And when they try it out, they say, "Wow, this is fun." And I think the only reason why it's debatable is because when it was under somebody's IP control, they decided we're not publishing anymore, and everybody's got in their head, well, that means it failed. That means it sucked in some way. But now that we resurrected, that's not a problem like it used to be. And that's my 2 cents worth. What do you think, Mike? What's so special about the OSR and the games that attract so many people?
I think it's well, nostalgia is a huge part of it because if you look at the OSR, most people, I don't know most people, but I mean this is just arbitrary, but I think it appeals to people of a certain age and a certain level of experience. I do know people that maybe just started playing in 2000 or 2010 that enjoy OSR games, but I think the nostalgia is the big part of it. And the nostalgia also is something that the 5e players, it draws them to some of the OSR stuff because I told the story a million times, but I was talking to this kid and I said kid, he was in the early 20s and he was at North Texas a few years ago and I asked him what games he was in. He goes, well, I'm in a 5e game Friday. I'm in a AD&D 1e game Saturday. I said, well, that's kind of cool. I was like, well, I mean, why did you decide? Because I thought that's kind of interesting. He's doing that. He said, well, I like 5e, but I want to try D&D on the hard level because he considered AD&D hard because he could die and bad thing, because he'd heard all this story about AD&D. Oh yeah, you die all the time and everything's tougher and it's not balanced. And so I think there's a certain segment also that want to challenge themselves too.
Yeah.
They think, well, this OSR stuff, I mean, it's not all talky stuff. It's not all acting out. It's not storytelling gaming. It's, actual bad things can happen to you. So I mean but I think nostalgia is the big thing. People they either want to play like they played back in the day, or the newer players want to see how older players played. And they want to try that out and see if they can match up to those standards.
If they have the chops. I mean,
yeah, basically, yeah.
Total Con, it's got to be like 2019, 2020 was before COVID. I'm running Swords and Wizardry Light, and I get to the table, and I got my group there, and I had a full table, 8 players. 6 of them were the same home group. 2 of them were some poor schlops that signed up for the game and didn't realize that they were being outnumbered 3-1 by a home group. But the home group introduced themselves to me and said, hey, listen, we play 5e at home. We've never played any of the classic or OSR games. We saw your name, recognized your name just from the internet, and we're like, we want to see how he runs it. I go, really? So now the pressure's on me to give them a good experience, which I did. I killed 2 PCs, of course, because it happens. And they were like, wow, that was a lot of. They had a great time because it was different from what they had experienced. About the same time frame, I'm at GaryCon. It was the year we had the snow outs, Mike. When people were snowing, and I'm told I'm running a 5e game. I'm not. And I walk up to the table it was the Mouth of Doom, and I'm like, listen, your GM has been snowed out. I can't. If you want to run 5e, I need a co-DM because I know the adventure, but I can't run 5e. Or we got Swords which were light, full table. 1 walked away, 1 sat down because he saw the up and seat, and we went running. And the difference of play was striking in the first 30 minutes. But most of my table got the idea of, oh, I have to tell you what I'm doing, right? I don't just say I'm going to roll to intimidate. I'm going to, because Greg and I experienced this over a decade ago. I'm going to roll to intimidate, or I want to roll to detect lie. No,
I thought about that guy a lot making that video that I just dropped.
I'm sure.
He was at top of mind.
Yeah, and the thing is, that table that I ran, I had one guy who dipped off at that mid-game break, but he was the guy who kept on saying, well, what do you mean I can't roll to intimidate? And I had players who never played OSR going, dude, it's a different game. Tell them what you want to do. Tell them how you're intimidating. They're telling him. They're explaining to another 5e player what to do, and he dipped off and didn't come back. Of those remaining 7, 2 went to the Frog God booth immediately after the game, ran there because at 6 o'clock the booth was done, and it was 5:50 to get the more copies of the light rules and to get a copy of the complete rules. And the next day, another couple came by and they were like, "Oh, we were in your game yesterday. We want to see what you got for swords and wizardry," because when you have an effective challenge, there's an actual feeling of reward. If I just give you $100 on a street and say, "Here you go," you feel great. I got $100. You earn that $100. That money means something different to you. You're not just gonna, spend it on hookers and blow. You're gonna probably use it on something that's a bit more important to you because you earned it. And to
Well,
me, that's the difference between 5e and the old school games. What your character gets, you earned. But that's just me.
so Greg, what's so special about the OSR and the games that attract so many people?
Um, I don't know that there is a singular answer. I think that it goes to a lot of what you said about it cultivates a particular experience. And I think there's a, when I was talking earlier about people having a maximum amount of freedom, um, that's there's a large and growing number of people who are chafing at the way that the freedom that they have at the table is being restricted by games that come out that are modern, and they want to play something where they're in control. And I think there's just an innate appeal to that. And there, let me put it this way. So there's this game called Europa Universalis. Maybe a lot of people have probably played it. It's a video game.
I know it's
The
part of
second
the.
one was when I was in college. The second one had come out. It was awesome. Now you can play this game single player, and you can build the greatest colonial empire on earth. And you might feel good about yourself, whatever. But this was one of the first games that I played multiplayer where you actually engaged in serious diplomacy between sessions like it was a role-playing game. And you would spend 2 or 3 days going back and forth with somebody and working out an alliance to attack this third guy, and you would come up with all this stuff. And
Sounds like diplomacy on
yeah,
steroids.
and then when you actually, you spent 2 weeks planning and putting together this massive campaign, you've saved up this huge war chest, you've built out this big army, and you finally get to the point where you have to click on the declare war button. There's like you can feel butterflies in your chest. You're like, oh my God, I'm really going to be attacking this guy. And then you click go, and it's like intense for like 15 minutes. The only thing in the universe that exists is you're fighting these battles out in the game. And then when it's over, you're just like, oh my God, it's over. Like, you can't recreate that playing against a computer. And I think that's the difference is playing with all the training wheels and the bumpers up and all this shit. It's not as satisfying.
1 second, Dirty Dwarf, you are absolutely right about diplomacy.
Yes. But like, I mean, it's so rewarding to have it, because I could win 400 wars against AI France. That doesn't mean anything. But if I take down this guy who's playing France and he's good at playing France, then I feel really satisfied with myself. The comedian Adam Carolla talks about there's a big difference between happiness and satisfaction. And a lot of people are always looking for happiness, and then they're just on a perpetual treadmill rather than looking for being satisfied at having accomplished something. And I think that's also a factor here, that like building things up and doing things when you're the one in control and everything is at risk, and if it fails, that character's dead. There's a satisfaction to winning that you don't get if your character is invincible.
Yeah,
And
but I
you're
don't
just,
think
yeah.
that the way you phrase it, it's what ultimately sells on it. It's when you say that, and then you have your video or your blog post that shows how that works or explains, like highlights a session
Expertise
where that
matters.
works.
I agree with that. Yeah.
No. Where you highlight how it plays out in a session, that's what ultimately hooks the people into trying the OSR game, because when you hear that, it's like, wow, they're just there to beat the shit out of me. But then when they read about it, oh, I see how it's a challenge. I see how I could win or and lose, and how that's interesting. So, hey, so a follow up on something you said, Bad Mike, and this is for the rest of you. Now that we're 20, almost to our 20th anniversary of the OSR, 2006 to 2026, um, how much is nostalgia really the factor here? I mean, usually nostalgia fads are really short compared to 20 years of the OSR. Is the
Uh,
nostalgia really that much of a factor anymore?
Looking at the catalog of my products, you'd have a hard time making the case I'm running on nostalgia in terms of what I like. I'm updating the thing to be different from whatever it is nostalgic. I mean, I, I didn't play this stuff originally. I'm using old school design that I've come to as an adult.
Right, because
But your work appeals to people who are nostalgic for a past. Now, you have to understand something about nostalgia. Sometimes nostalgia, you're nostalgic for something that never really happened or past that never really
Right.
developed. And this is what you kind of want that could have happened but didn't really happen. So just because somebody's nostalgic for something doesn't mean that that's actually the way they played or the way they grew up. Maybe it's something they wish they'd have done, or they wish they'd grow up like that. They wish they'd had a group. I know plenty of people that aren't as lucky as I am, and they never had a group growing up. They didn't have a steady group, and they just played off and on for decades. They never had a group, a campaign group they could just sit down with and play. I mean, I went through periods of time, 3, 4, 5 years, when I didn't have a steady group. So there's some people out there that they get nostalgia for a past they never had. And I think, Greg, a lot of the people like you're talking about, like you, I mean, you're probably nostalgic for a past you never experienced. You never got to do the kind of things we
But
did.
yes, okay. So you have been part of a publishing companies for better part of it, more than a decade. So you had to deal with long-term market trend, and I always been told that nostalgia at the market trend is fleeting, especially now that we're in 20 years. So how is it that we are today if now nostalgia is still a factor? Because everybody else with a marketing degree or people who are really
Right.
competent and know their stuff will tell you that nostalgia binges don't last that long.
But okay, Rob, why do people watch a show like Mad Men and love Mad Men? Mad Men, if you looked at it, if you just tried to pitch that to start, they'd say, I don't want to watch a show about advertising executives in the 60s. Who cares? That's boring. Don't want to do it. It's a great show, and there's a lot of shows like that they build on nostalgia that never was. I didn't live during the 60s.
Yeah, but
I
Mad
love to
Men
watch.
was what now 5 years in the past?
All right, but
Are they doing Mad Men now?
yeah,
There's shows like that. The Marvelous Miss Maisel takes place in the 50s. I mean, my wife loves it. I've seen an episode here and
Yeah,
there. No big deal.
that is a secret guilty pleasure of mine. I like her.
But there's people watch it for the fashion. They watch it just to see, because as long as they're kind of accurate to history, they think it's kind of cool to see how things were back then. So, I mean, there's things like that we
Being
appreciate.
interested in his story.
Yeah,
like,
but
I love
okay.
Braveheart.
So
That doesn't
when can we
nostalgic for
say what
small
is the
country Scotland.
Look at comic
when
books.
can we say that the OSR? What? Tell me, what is your absolute criteria where you admit that nostalgia is not the factor in the OSR market?
but
Right now?
but Rob, you're asking Mike about the business, right? Now, here's the reality of the business. Most OSR publishers, including Frog God Games, including the Trolls, right? They all publish material in 5e, and they convert to Swords and Wizardry, or they have a Swords and Wizardry product
True.
that they convert to 5e because 5e was the moneymaker that let them do their vanity OSR products.
Sure.
In my humble opinion, games like Shadow Dark coming in and whacking us in the nuts with $4 million on Kickstarter between two projects is enough to put those paddles to the OSR and say, you know what, you can be viable without having to sell directly to 5e people and make it a secondary market for the OSR. I think that shows that it's viability.
But I don't think that's a nostalgia, because the nostalgia is typically for the aesthetic. And as we've moved forward, like the reason why Shadow Dark is massively successful, and not the sole reason, a huge portion of it, is because the aesthetic is crisp and clean and modern. It doesn't look like something Gary Gygax published.
It doesn't, but what is it? It's black and white, right?
You're right.
It's black
I'm
and
not
white.
saying it's totally.
And I'll tell you, there are companies that were like, oh, we got to go color because everybody likes color. It's black and white, and the font is big enough to appeal to old 58-year-old eyes like mine and Bad Mike's and Rob's.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where and I'm gonna throw.
I don't buy products I can't read anymore. I don't buy anything I can't read.
I'm gonna throw a company under the bus whose work I love, but I cannot read, and that's Mythmere Publishing, because I can't read the font. If you're trying to appeal to people at our age, realize that our eyes are.
It's not about age, because you're not taking into account cell phone. Okay, the thing that sold me on the Shadow Dark layout is opening it on my phone. I'm telling you, it had nothing to do with. I didn't have the physical product for months and months and months. I had the PDF. I put it on my phone so I could read it when I was laying in bed watching Law and Order with my wife or whatever. And when I pulled it up on my phone, it was amazingly easy to read on my phone. So this doesn't have to do with age. This has to do with accessibility, that you can have it. It's presenting information in smaller chunks, crisper, tighter language. It doesn't have this long. One of the things I've seen looking back at a lot of modules on my channel the past couple of weeks is the long-windedness, the long explanations that they went into for something that in Shadow Dark you'd write as a half a sentence, right? That's what it is. It's cutting it way down to some sharp, terse writing that you can just communicate. It's not about the aesthetic all the time, but people are happy with updating the aesthetic for accessibility and being able to read it, being able to use it, right? It's not. I don't have to write this spell description so that we absolutely can't get fucked over by some GM who wants to misread the spell. I can just write the spell description, and then if there's some little wiggle room, just leave it to the GM. We'll move on. Like when the first thing that came up was Shadow Dark in our group about how long does the halfling's invisibility work if they attack, if they do these other things, there's no answer. Just make up the answer. So you're cutting all of the thing about if you attack, it does this, if this happens, it does that. Just dump all that shit and just say the GM decides what happens if it breaks this little basic principle.
Right. And it makes each campaign unique, which is special. Now, going back to the nostalgia aspect, when I came back to gaming, and I came back via Fantasy Grounds, but my first VTT gaming with voice and all that stuff was with Greg. And then after that, I started running games. I didn't run games like I ran them back in the day because I had matured. I had, I was in my 40s. I wasn't in my teens and my 20s. I had a blast running games in my teens and my 20s. I wouldn't run it that way today. So when we look back and we think fondly about how we played games, we don't run them that way today. I don't know anybody who runs an RPG at my age that they ran it the same way back then, because we can see, we hopefully learned from 2 decades of life experiences what works and what doesn't. Nostalgia is looking back with these rose-colored glasses and thinking about how perfect it was, and it was because you're looking back at it. But the reality is, the way we run things now, for the most part, and the way these OSR games are written to be run, they're not written to be run exactly as they were 30 years ago.
Well, let me give you an example. So, Star Trek, the original series, the special effects were ridiculous. It was clunky. You couldn't do that now. So they have a Star Trek series now that's actually a prequel to Star Trek original series. Brave New Worlds with Pike. they would have been idiots to sit there and go, okay, we're going to do the same kind of budget things we did with the original series. We're going to have cardboard computers and a bunch of lights blinking. And I mean, no, of course you don't do that. You don't go that, you don't dig that far into the nostalgia where you're like, we're going to do it exactly like the original series did and have that kind of budget and those kind of cheap, special effects and everything. No, that they're doing a prequel to Star Trek, but they're doing it with modern special effects, with modern writing, with modern sensibilities.
But with 1960s hairstyles, which
but everything's still, but they're winking at you and saying, "Look, we're going to do this, and this, like the original series did." But we know we can't do that, and that, because that would just be ludicrous. So we're going to do this instead. So you can do that. So just because the Player's Handbook had no index, which by the way was idiotic then, and it's idiotic now. That you had to remember you had to memorize the pages the rules are on, doesn't mean you'd ever write a book now without an index. We're gonna absolutely ape the style of the Player's Handbook and not have an index just to not have an index. That's ludicrous. You would never do that. So the nostalgia is based on some things, but not other things. And sometimes the aesthetic is part of it. Sometimes the aesthetic isn't part of it.
So one thing I would say about what yours is that now that we're 20 years in, there's now a rather large group of people, and not, there's us here in this chat, there's James Spahn, there is Alexander Macris, there's James Molesky of Grenardia, there is, the rest of the Fraud Gods team. There are a lot of people that have, in terms of working with the older rules, more experience than TSR ever did back in the day. And I think, and there's far more of us trying different things with it. Kevin Crawford, and the list goes on. And I think that's become telling in how the OSR is doing in the marketplace. We're doing a lot. We're punching up above our weight class. I say we're equal to 2 or 3 as collective. 2 or 3 of the major publishers of RPG collectively. And some of us are almost there to a major publisher by themselves.
Look at things that were published back then. And once again, this is nostalgia working. When you look at a lot of the old, let's say the original AD&D adventures, and you compare them to what's written down, they're not very good. A lot of them are railroady. And when you talk about choices, you didn't have choices. They told you 4 to 7 players between the levels of 6 to 8. That you're not going to run a first level character through there because you'll die. Your character will all be killed if you try to run a first level party through the Slaver series.
Just one second. You deserve it, James. You've done good work.
You look at the stuff that's been published now, and you look at the creators now, and you realize that these guys, if Rob had been working, if Greg had been working, if Greg Gillespie had been working, can you imagine in 1981 if Greg Gillespie threw Barrel Maze out there? It would have blown people's minds. It would be, I think it would be considered the greatest D&D adventure ever written in the history of the game. We'd be looking at it now like, amazing.
Well, because at the time, I would temper that. It would definitely elicit strong opinions in both directions.
I think it would. Look, I would have, if something like that had come out in 1981, I would have played it religiously for God knows how long, because there was nothing like that out there. I
agree. There was nothing like it out there, but just trust me, I've played it right. I have used parts of it, and enough players to know there will elicit strong opinion in both directions.
Rob, I'm talking about 1981. So you go to the store and you pick up the latest Judges Guild
1981.
The latest Judges Guild piece of crap. You pick up Tower of Ulysses, which was terrible. You pick up EX1 Dungeon Land by Gary, and then I'm gonna pick up this Barrel Maze thing. Holy effing F! Oh my God, I can run a campaign for 5 years with this. Look at all the rooms in here. I'm just saying is that
but you're not getting that Barrel Maze has a very specific feel to it. If you don't like that feel, then you're gonna hate the module.
Yeah, but all
You
those
wouldn't have
modules that
in
you're talking
1981.
about
You
from the
wouldn't have.
past have a very specific feel. That's
There's
the
so
point.
much garbage. There was so much garbage that we don't even talk about in 1981 through 1985 that we played because we didn't have anything else. But it's garbage. You read it now, it's not very good. It's just not good stuff because that's what it was. The creators now are this is like the golden age of everything. It's the golden age of board games, but it's the golden age of the creators now are far superior. And look, and I love these guys. I love these older guys. I love Alan Hammock and Steve Winter and Zeb Cook and everything. And I could name you the adventures I think still hold up. There's not a lot, but I think there's some still hold up. But the majority of them, they wrote it under pressure for low pay. That they cut corners. They didn't care. That they weren't trying to create anything, but just a bunch of random encounters. And the writers now, you and Greg Gillespie and Jeff Talanian, you guys are actually doing a much better job than these guys did back in the late 70s, early 80s. But I mean, and I don't know how much is because you guys are just that creative or just because you've learned.
I'll be glad to stand alongside, but I'm not going to put myself above their pedestal.
Historically, the reason why certain parts of the Earth developed economically much faster, technologically much faster, is all based on communication, right? It's much easier to communicate with other parts of the Mediterranean or up and down river valleys across around the edge of the Indian Ocean than it is to cross over the middle of Africa, to cross over the steppe, to do all these things. So the communication allowed all these people to share their ideas and develop new technologies, and all this stuff moves forward. That's what's happened. So in the 80s, these there could have been great guys, but they were separated by not having good communication with one another.
Well, I would add to that, we had the ability, we have not the unlimited, because there were still limits because, the license had product identity, but we could share and reuse good ideas far easier.
Yes.
Not only there was a legal framework, there was an expectation that we're in this to share what we created.
That's what I'm saying. So that we live in a time where we can all be talking about this stuff. People can make a video or a blog post or a tweet and say, here's my idea. And other people of equal caliber can come back and talk to them. But in 1982, what are you going to talk to your grandma about this stuff and get her idea, get her feedback? Who are you going to be able to communicate with?
And if you had the idea, and it was, even if it was good enough, your choices were either mimeograph, which we all know what the mimeographs were like, or you had to have thousands of bucks to shell out for a print run, and you hope up the distributor would pick it up.
Sure. Look at some of the best stuff published in the 80s. It's all pretty much third-party stuff. Look at something like Midkemia's City of Cars. It's amazing. It's an amazing product. TSR, you know what the first Fantasy City TSR came out with was 1989 City of Greyhawk. So the game had been out for 15 years before they ever even thought, let's do a giant city. And I don't think City of Greyhawk's that great. You look at stuff like Midkemia, they had the City of Kars, they had 2 or 3 different cities. There was a lot of third-party products like that.
Yeah, and Kars wasn't that big, so it was very approachable. It was useful and easy to use.
I used it because there was no TSR had no cities. I wasn't going to write a city. I thought City State of the Invincible Overlord was too hard. It was too big. City State of the Invincible Overlord was too big for me. But the City of Kars, I could pull that out and I could use the map and use it had all the buildings, what was in it, the people in there, everything. And so
Mike, what you're saying is accessibility is important.
It is very important, and that's why. Look, it even goes with what we expect out of a D&D module. Now, you look at so much of the stuff, the whole concept of a funhouse dungeon that would have never existed without Lawrence.
You mean this City of Cars?
Yes, I used that. I used that. Used it and abused it, Rob.
But by the way, Mike, you got fact checked.
Why?
Lankmar 86.
Oh, yes, right.
That's right.
Well, I meant, okay, you're right. Lankmore, though, was a fantasy city based on Lieber's world. So,
So there's the city
Unlike
map for
Greyhawk,
cars.
which is not a fantasy city.
Well, I mean, that Greyhawk was something that TSR. I mean, that was the
Are you saying that
basis
they
of Gary's
invented it? They had to
campaign.
invent it
I mean,
themselves.
well, why didn't Cedar Greyhawk come out in 1979? Good Lord. I mean, I'm sure Gary didn't have it written up because Gary famously didn't have detailed notes on anything. But I'm just saying, by the time it came out, it was too late. There was already so many fantasy cities out there that I think were better
No,
than
I got to
this
be critical of you, Mike. This is thicker than I thought it would be. It's 79 pages, and my city
Yeah, but it's
state.
easy. Look how it's divided into sections of the city, though.
It's
You,
actually
it's divided up.
organized.
So
Yeah,
I
but
could just
city state was divided into streets. So what's your point?
the city state was too big, man. It was jive freaking gigantic.
And City State was on newsprint.
I mean, I don't
Oh
know.
yes, yeah. City State was
So,
kind of hard to read. That's true.
yeah.
But I thought
But
City State was. I had City
Seriously?
State.
Hard? Did you get the Chaosium version then?
that's
No, the
what I had.
Chaos version was built easier to read, but no, I used that version. Version was fine. But we're talking also. This is Bad Mike when he was 20 years old, not Bad Mike at 62. So but back then it was a little more
Right.
I mean,
forgiving.
I'm not going to yank out my copy of City State. It's buried at the moment, but I'm looking at these and they're very comparable. Not in terms of
But it's a
feel of
good
the city,
look.
but
It's a good product, right? It's a really good product. It's
yeah,
an
they're both
excellent-
really
it's-
good products.
Yeah, it's an excellent product, and it served a purpose, but nobody knew about it. It was hard to find. It wasn't put out by a big company back then. Nowadays, we're people like you and Greg and you benefit by the fact that you can print your own stuff, you can do your own marketing, you can get that stuff out there. Everybody can find your stuff, and it's kind of hard for people to realize how hard it was and look, third-party stuff in the 80s, you had to be really careful that you had nothing to do with D&D. You couldn't mention anything about D&D in there. You had to be very, very careful that TSR wasn't going to come after you if you threw in something like, Big B's Hand or something. You had to be very, very careful. I think now because of the OGL, it's a little easier for us to do stuff like that.
So
Yeah,
I would like to do a brief aside. This is on the topic of city. I have an oddball product called this was actually sold in a game store. I bought it in the game, the City of Califax.
I have Califax too.
And these were done on a color laser. Unfortunately, I spilled something, so forgive the stain.
Of course
But
you do.
But it must have been done on a late '80s color laser. But yeah,
That's how it was, man. But I mean, you're not going to put that out. You wouldn't put that out now like that because people would laugh at it. But that was probably state of the art for 1988 or whatever it came out. I can't remember when Califax came out.
So, Mike, I recently had a product that it was a dungeon that I had converted over from a one-page dungeon that I made 10 years ago into a Shadow Dark dungeon right when the Kickstarter was blowing up. And people were looking for something to play with the quick start rules before we even had the rules, right? So I'd made this basic conversion. And I recently went back and redid the whole map in a new modern style and redid the whole product. Now with modern generator, I use the Whatabout. I can pass Eric the link. I think Eric probably has a link too.
The one
as a generator to just generate a whole bunch of dungeons. And then I opened up the files in Photoshop and just stitched the rooms together in a way that I wanted.
And to Whatabout's credit, many of those generators were also export in SGV format, so you can bring it into Illustrator or CorelDRAW and actually edit the vectors that make up the map.
So it only took me about 4 to 6 hours to make dungeon map the way that I wanted. Imagine how hard it would be for somebody with no art skills to do that in 1980.
yeah.
And also,
We can make resources now that the things that you're not particularly good at doing on your own, you can use tools to generate those things very, very quickly compared to what's ever existed before. And we can make a whole bunch of new stuff.
and also, the whole logistics of running a business today has changed for the better with with crowdfunding. I mean, I realize if you're in a business trying to make a living, there are certain challenges. But if you want to realize a product within your hobby time, it's easier for all of us to support each other because as people know, I did my Majestic Fantasy Kickstarter, got over $40,000, which allowed me to get pay for stuff like that. Which in the '80s,
Oh
this
God.
would be an
Mhm.
unrealistic option.
Or you'd have a harder
Where would you even find? I mean, look, think about artists. Where do you even find artists in the '80s? You got to know the guy. You got to know somebody that draws art. You're not gonna you can't jump on the
Well,
internet and find a kick-ass artist
we
because you're not.
weren't quite as benighted as that, but what you would have to done is go to convention because the convention, people forget that convention were not just for entertainment, there were for people to industry to meet with each other. So you would go for the convention looking for artists to hire on your projects.
And then think about nowadays with the internet. I've got a guy that does some art for me for some of the modules I write, and he'd do the art. Then I open up my page. He sends it to me, and I can tell immediately how I want to make changes. Can you imagine? Imagine how hard it was back in the '80s when you contract the guy to do 7 pieces of art. You wait, I don't know, 2 months. You don't, and you're calling the guy. He's not answering you, and then finally he sends them in the mail, and they're not exactly what you wanted. But you're like, close enough. My God, I can't wait any longer for this. I mean,
So,
that's.
so sorry to interrupt. So as we want to, let's ask the last question that I got off that I found. What specific systems would you recommend trying? Eric, go.
for the OSR.
Yep, for the OSR.
I would go OSE. If you're coming from 5e, the OSE presentation is extremely clear writing. Even though it is essentially basic expert slash labyrinth lord, it is takes production qualities up to 11. So that would be my go-to. If you want something where you can look at it and go, "Oh, I can rock that." My own Swords and Witchery Light. It's free on drive through. It's 4 pages. Two face the GM. Two basically would face the player. You can be up and running if you've ever played D&D of any version before very quickly. And if you want to still feel familiar with 5e and yet get your feet on that shore of the OSR, I would say Shadow Dark.
Greg?
It depends on what you want out of your game. If you want a game that is very fast and action oriented, and you got a lot, a lot going on in a very short period of time. The players are new. I guess beer and pretzels kind of header. Shadow Dark is definitely the thing I would recommend. If you're looking for a long form game where you're really able to develop this character and have a ton of power and build it up, I think Acts 2 is superb.
Don't be intimidated by the size of the books, by the way.
Now, you can run both games in the other mode.
Right.
You can run long form games of Shadow Dark that go on for across a huge map and have a whole bunch of exploration, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't have to just be like a one shot. And you can run Acts 2 in a one shot. The character creation is just slightly more involved than OSC. All you're doing is making a few proficiency choices that
right
kind of like feats, but they're not really.
That's why I said don't be intimidated by the size of the book.
Yeah, because at the core of it, Adventure Conquer King is a BX based system. It just has like trade rules, castle building rules.
All the difficult
it has
stuff
all the subsystems.
All the difficult stuff that people think of as being complex comes on as your character starts to go up in level. At first level, it's essentially mechanically the same complexity level. But I'd want you to, if your goal is to build a long, huge, campaign that lasts a year and a half, I think you'll probably enjoy Acts 2 better. If your plan is to run shorter games, I think you'll enjoy Shadow Dark better. But I think both are fine Crossways. And right now I'm running OSE every Saturday night in Gods of the Forbidden North. I think there's a ton of great systems out there. And I'd say play stuff that's outside of your comfort zone. I recommend everybody that's into old school gaming at some point pick up a game like Alien and run it, where it really shows you what life can be like in a different mode, and that's how you get all sorts of great ideas for ways to improve your own material, your own games, getting outside of your experience.
Bad Mike, what do you recommend?
Well, I would say so these are all different type experiences. Shadow Dark, I think, is a great game. I would agree that I don't know if I consider OSR or OSR adjacent, because it, at its roots, it's a 5e type game that
it's a 5e engine.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you guys make this claim. What about it is 5e? Except for advantage and disadvantage, what about it is mechanically 5e?
Disadvantage and advantage disadvantage is enough by itself, isn't it? There's nothing like that in any of the.
So you're saying that My Majestic Fantasy RPG is 5e?
Yeah, I could take OSE and add advantage disadvantage. It doesn't turn into 5e.
Yeah.
It's an expectation that the players didn't have back in the day. You're adding something, and it's not just advantage disadvantage, Greg. That's not the only thing.
What is it? I played a fuck ton of this game, man. I don't understand what it is that's 5e.
I think it's OSR adjacent, and I don't. Kelsey is not going to go out there and tell you that this is a 100% OSR game too. She's going to point to her experience with 5e.
That's not going to say a lot to beat up on you, Mike. But the point isn't whether Shadow Dark is OSE. Greg's question is, why is Shadow Dark 5e?
I don't think it is. It's not 5e, but it's 5e. It has 5e to its roots. It's not 5e, but it's 5e.
Well, what makes it 5e? And
that's what I'm saying. Other than advantage and disadvantage, what makes it like 5e?
I'll do it. If you want to do a whole show on this, you can. I just kind of wanted to get my choices out.
We got,
this is going to be like an hour. I could get going on this, but I mean,
I just hear people make this claim, and I'm like, I don't understand.
And I like Shadow.
I kind of agree with Greg here.
These are weeds, and I don't want to, water them with my bladder. So let's
but I think if you wanted to play an OSR game, I like Shadow Dark. I like Swords and Wizardry quite a bit. And these are all different flavors, by the way. They all do some things well, other things they do differently. Like OSD a lot. I mean, I'm not as big a fan of the layout as OSD as some people are, but there's a lot of things I like about OSD. I think OSD is the purest BX type game out there. I think if you wanted to play something that's basically BX, play OSD. And I'll tell you what, one of the games I really, really like is Greg Gillespie's Dragon Slayer.
Yeah.
Because Dragon Slayer to me is the best of 1E and BX. It's the way you wish AD&D would run. It's AD&D without all the weird shit like weapon speed factor and armor class stuff. I mean, just all this extracurricular wargaming stuff that Gary shoved in there because that's what everybody did at the time. Everybody was basing their RPG off a war game, and it's a pure adventuring experience using the best of AD&D and the best of BX. I think Dragon Slayer is really, really good.
I played Dragon Slayer with this guy.
but I mean, it depends on your flavor, and that's the great thing that's what's so great about the OSR. There's so many flavors of it. I mean, I like basic fantasy role playing too. That's a cool game. I think basic fantasy role playing has the same issue that Labyrinth Lord has. It hasn't been updated in a long time, and I know that sounds counterintuitive to think, well, why would you be updating an old school game? But I think at some point it is good to throw an update on a game like that. And I think basic fantasy role playing works great. If you just want to sit around and play something very intuitive, basic fantasy role play does it. But I think all those are great. And I think that like I said, depends on your flavor of game. If you wanted something, like I said, if you wanted to play AD&D, but you didn't want all the stuff you don't like about AD&D, I'd play Dragon Slayer. If you wanted to play the best version of BX, I'd play OSE. If you wanted to play OD&D, but not quite OD&D, play Swords and Wizardry. If you basically that's an OD&D game with some first editionisms in there, just enough to make it a little, because people don't remember when Swords and Wizard first came out. Matt Finch slavishly adapted OD&D. He didn't have thieves. Like, oh no, OD&D didn't have thieves. We're not going to have thieves. And so many people complained about that. He put thieves in there because the original OD&D rules didn't have thieves. And Matt finally begrudgingly said, "Yeah, you're right. It needs thieves." So it's OD&D with the best parts of 1E. But in Shadow Dark, it's the easiest, best game to play if you just want to pick up a game and everybody loves the game and everybody likes to play the game. And there's so many reasons why too. And I think Shadow Dark is kind of the way you start out. That's like your entry point, and then from there you decide I want my game a little more like this, and that's when you move to Dragon Slayer or you move to OSC or you move to another system.
So Eric posted a link. This is a link to all the core rule books under the OSR category of Drive Through RPG. I encourage people to go and browse through that list, sort it alphabetically, sort it from date release, sort it by whatever category you want. But you'll see there's a wealth of titles to choose from. But the one
I'm in
I
sixth
personally
place.
like.
Awesome.
The one I personally like is Swords and Wizardry Complete. I feel that has all the essence of classic D&D in a nice, tidy package. Maybe the font's too small, but in terms of the system, it's elegant, it's compact,
Yep.
and I really like it. But if you want to introduce somebody to the OSR, Chicago Wizard, Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter, I think it's the best, hands down. It's not about the adventure or the stripped down rules that it has in it.
Oh, at the
He
quick start.
explains everything.
The quick start. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did a quick start, a white box quick start. My God, like 12 years ago.
I don't think it's white box. I think it's just
Yeah, I know, but it's like white box
yeah.
essentially. Yeah,
And he coaches you through the whole process, explain things every step of the way. And I think that would make it. And it's free to download. And of course, as a publisher myself, I got my Majestic Fantasy RPG out there. They told me the basic rules, told me levels 1 through 5, and Black Marsh, which has 20,000 downloads and still climbing on Drive Through RPG. So
and
people seem to like it.
I'm going to
So
pimp this for Rob. By the way, when I came back to GMing after Greg's valiant attempt to get us through D&D Next playtesting, I used Osric and Black Marsh, and
Are
Black.
we covered by that NDA anymore?
I have it's over a decade.
There was an NDA.
Yeah, there was an NDA. I had to sign it twice. I was in two different playtest groups, one face to face in Manhattan and Greg's. Oh my fucking god! Listen, as a quick aside, Greg, he formed this group with the intent of getting all different flavors of D&D in the players. So a 4E player, a 3 player, somebody who played basic, somebody who was the AD&D player. And my God, the 4E player, if we had been at a table with this person, they would have flipped the table multiple times. They would have flipped the table. Just saying.
It was wild.
It was wild. Well,
Nobody
Rob,
flipped.
you
Nobody
certainly picked a good topic for tonight. Lively chat. I'm going to give a huge thank you to Agile Monk. I didn't get a chance to thank you earlier in the show verbally. I thanked you in the chat. But when I've got three such, talkative, energetic, old grognards, not Greg. Greg's not a grognard. He's too young to be a grognard. But when the conversations are going, I didn't want to just stop it and But Agile Monk, thank you so much. We don't ask. We've never asked for super chats on any of these live streams. We do appreciate them when they come in greatly. Agile Monk also purchased some gift memberships for people. Those will last a month. If you were gifted, I'm going to remind you right now, go to the post section after this live stream on this channel. There are posts that give free content to everybody. All right, they're Dropbox links, and they're a post that link to members only content and magic items. Looks like you can still vote, but it looks like one page dungeons are going to be next on the list to get behind the in front of the paywall for everybody, and also behind the paywall for members that are down 99 and up. So, just a quick reminder for that. So, thank you all. Thank you, Agile. Other than that, thanks to Rob for the great topic. Thanks to Greg. Go to Greg's channel, by the way, Chubby Funster. If you subscribe to my channel, you should be subscribed to Greg's channel. We're going to be probably working in the future. We've already started with Joe to do some collaborations where we both kind of address the same topic. We are going to be expanding that, and I think we're going to probably grab Greg kicking and screaming into the mix at some point. just a fair warning. Mike, thank you for dropping in.
So I just want to
Yeah.
brag a little. I kind of like I wrote a blog post on my blog. So if you go to Bat in the Attic, you can read my essay on it. But I also posted it to Reddit and to the OSR group in Reddit, and it has 23,000 views.
God,
Jeez.
God
Oh
bless,
my
God
God!
bless you, Rob. You know,
On Reddit.
On 154 likes. Which
all
is,
right, and folks, just so you know, you'll probably never ever see me on Reddit. It's like in the Cantina in Star Wars, scum and villainy. There are good times. You could probably get good drinks and have good company, but I'm just saying, there's if you want gatekeeping, there's some pretty big gatekeepers there.
oh hell yeah!
Oh,
Yeah,
By
they
the way,
shit on
Eric,
me.
I just looked at this NDA and it looks like it is forever.
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 So
Are you talking the
I
D&D
can't
next
say that
NDA?
the play
There
test
is no termination date on this NDA.
Oh my
Even
god.
though they publicly posted the playtest materials on.
Yep.
Yep.
What would happen if you broke the NDA?
They would be able to sue us under the state of Washington.
Boo hoo.
I've been there, done that.
I'm about to say, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
oh no. Oh no.
You can have your lawyers.
Their lawyer would pull up my estate and say, "Oh dear God, no, just let
Yeah.
It's all
That's
fun
okay.
and games until you have to put down a $10,000 retainer.
So
just say, go ahead and sue. I don't know what you think you're gonna get, bro. But
folks, listen, live stream tomorrow night with my wife and myself, Camera's Health. And on Sunday, the collaboration between Joe and I should go out. And more live streams next week. You know, the marvelous thing. Thank you so much. Again, Agile, thank you. And we'll catch